Hello, it's me here, and this is Gumpo, a tribal, with aspirations of becoming a ruler of a technologically advanced civilization. However, he has a rather rough start, starting with nothing but the body he was born with, and left in the middle of the frozen tundra. This was going to be a challenge. There's just one thing. Gumpo has a deep, dark secret. He likes humanoid entrails. So let's follow along and see how he gets on. Strap yourselves in. This is a slow burner. Since the growing season in this chilly wasteland is extremely limited, we need to get off to a strong start. Gumpo lays down some rice plots in preparation for the harsh winter to come. We have here an anima tree. Gumpo can meditate here to become some kind of magical wizard. This really does appeal to him, so he will be doing this daily. After a long day of planting rice, Gumpo does a spot of cloud watching. Anyway, the next step of survival is shelter, so Gumpo gets down to gathering some wood in order to craft his little hovel. This is promptly followed by passing out in the mud. Sleep well, little buddy. You have an interesting journey ahead of you. The next day, while gathering up some supplies, a small feeling of starvation sinks in. Some emergency berries are in order. After getting his fill of berries, he begins the foundations of his starting home. He's going to utilise the heat that spews out of the geyser nearby to heat his little shack. Who's a smart boy? The final touches are added to the first room where Gumpo can finally hang his hat and bunker down for the night. The day is rounded off with a tinge of tree worship. Meditating at the tree produces grass, and when 20 of them have accumulated, you get yourself some magical powers. I won't argue. Gumpo finally has a roof over his head and settles in for a well-earned night's rest. The following morning, the geyser room reaches its completion, allowing this wooden shack to get some much-needed heat. Gumpo notices a big table in a nearby ruin and decides to pinch it for himself. He really doesn't enjoy eating without a table, for whatever reason, so this is a nice addition. We have a visitor, who undoubtedly pities this naked man living out of an empty run-down wooden cabin. To make himself feel better, Gumpo builds a little stool to sit at while he eats. Progression at its finest. Finally, some action. A snow hare has gone crazy within the area. Gumpo arms himself with a log and heads out to take this creature head on. He doesn't have the best melee ability, so this is going to take a while. He also has a massive disdain for primitive weapons, due to his ideology. He prefers more elegant and technologically advanced ways to deal with his foes. So this spontaneous log weapon will upset him for a while. After a rather drawn-out battle, he finally vanquishes this creature. But not after sustaining 10 whole hair nibbles. Poor show. Time we set up a butchering spot, along with a primitive fire, in order to cook up our new fluffy friend. Morning comes and we can start making some proper food, which Gumpo is still not too pleased with. He has a much more unique appetite. The rest of the day was spent mainly gathering amongst other bits and bobs. Later that night we get our very first anima grass. Splendid. It is finally rice time. How exciting. While cooking we have our first raid. We were caught on the back foot and really wasn't prepared for such hostilities. Time to pop down some emergency traps. We have 0 in the way of weaponry, so this is our only chance of survival. Our assailant is equipped with a big old spiky stick. The first trap is set and Gumpo rushes to arm the second one. But it's too late. He's at our front door. Hopefully one is sufficient enough. Bugger. What happens next, I have never witnessed in all my hours within Rimworld. While enduring spiky stick strikes, Gumpo continues crafting the trap right under his feet. And it works. Huh, would you look at that? The evening passes, and the next day, Gumpo carves up his prize. Finally, some meaningful food. He is very happy. He doesn't quite manage to finish his prized meal before the day's end. So the next day, some frantic preparations. Until a sad wonder. Not being able to finish up meal preparations, he decides to eat some raw human meat. This still counts towards the mood buff. Very fortunate. He finally snaps out of his sad wonder, but because he didn't manage to get his cook on, the human meat rotted away. A strict diet of rice from now on. What have we learnt, Gumpo? Later that evening, he reflects on his naughty behaviour. Wood is in fairly short supply here, and we need a decent stockpile to survive through the winter. So we round up what we can. Despite Gumpo's disdain for primitive weapons, he's going to need to craft a bow to hunt the less superior form of meat, animal. While resting up after a long day of hunting, some intruders. A couple of them. Gumpo skillfully navigates them right into his traps. They didn't know what hit them. Now for some much needed target practice. While they lie bleeding out on the floor, he continues to let those arrows fly. Have I mentioned Gumpo is a bit of a savage? I'm sure this will become glaringly obvious the more time we spend shadowing him, but for now, training time. Anyway, since he missed the first main opportunity for a delectable human-based meal, this will be handled with a bit more care. There's a mad elk lurking around, and Gumpo decides to just stay indoors, although it is making a lot of racket. Right, at long last, a meal consisting of man flesh. He's a very happy chappy. But not for long. A psychic drone rolls in. One step forward and two back, and all that. Attempting to get one of those steps forward, we're going to rearm the traps. They're the only defense we really have. We are back out into the rice fields. It is of utmost importance that we get as many harvests in as possible. Within the Tundra, we have a very limited period in which we can grow. So get on it, Gumpo. He has been a good boy of late and deserves a little treat. Place your bets at what his well-earned prize might be. That's right, tribal wear made of human skin. Donning his new attire, he gets to hauling up some wood. After that fashion-fueled fury of foraging, it's time for an extension. If Gumpo has any visitors, they'll need a place to crash, as well as a spot to convince them that eating people is okay. Now, what isn't okay is our lack of research. Because of our tribal start, we just about know how to make fire. Let's get to changing that. The first step of our intellectual journey, stone cutting. The frozen tundra has a tendency to get extremely cold, and we can utilise that. Pop a couple of holes in the roof and boom, a freezer. It really is that simple. Now let's fill that sucker up. We'll just pepper it with a couple of shots and let nature run its course. After a few hours researching, the course has been run. A little midnight snack. Now what's this? A refugee in need of shelter. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. They might be a fine addition. Did you spot the mistake? Run that back. Nobody disturbs Gumpo's sleep. No one. Gumpo just goes about his day while the refugee writhes around outside in the freezing cold. Ah, look at that. A nice snuggly sleeping bag. I wonder how our guest is getting on. still going, despite being outside in the -13-degree temperature for around 12 hours. That's one sturdy 73-year-old. While fixing up a spot of breakfast the next morning, nature finally takes its course. A bulk's goods trader shows up, where we can hand them all the bits and pieces our meals have left behind. While deep in some heavy research, one of the more poorly timed raids I've seen comes in. This gentleman wants to have a go. What a terrible, terrible mistake. Well, never say no to some free food. I'm sure these traders won't judge us too harshly for our actions. With this fresh new abundance of food, Gumpo settles in for a long day of cooking. The main plan to get through the winter is to fry up a lot of pemmican, a long-lasting ball of dried brown goop. It will keep us fueled up during the dangerous seasons. A mission comes in, a challenge to deal with some miserable weather. Where I'm from, this is rather ubiquitous, so do your worst. We'll get a plant pot in return. Another mission. The Deserter. Lascaris? Lascaris? For simplicity's sake, I will now refer to you as Lass from this point on. Lass will join us, but we will be attacked immediately. This is our first big chance to get some real weaponry, and we really can't afford to miss out on that. Lass is somewhat a bit of a combat specialist, and will make a fine addition to the colony. But first things first, we must convince her of our human-consuming ways. Before any of that, however, we are instantly hit with the search party hunting Lass, and she is having none of it. I reckon she'll fit right in. At this point, it is probably worth mentioning we are playing with combat extended today, and as a result, ammo is extremely valuable, especially when you can't even craft a bed, let alone ammunition. It's time to begin the process of convincing Lass that eating people is cool. This muddy room will be her home for a while. Well, it's been a productive day. Gumpo can rest well knowing he's made some real progress. A new day dawns, and it's a good idea to get the convincing room equipped with some much needed homely commodities. This is all in vain, however, because Lass throws a tantrum. Why do I even bother? Time to serve up the search party. While finishing up the final touches to his meal, a trader comes by. We fork over some spiky sticks and tattered clothes for a little bit of cash. Lass is convinced that eating humans is morally justifiable, a step in the right direction. Now to persuade her to just stick around. This might be a little tricky, however. She's got hypothermia. My bad. Winter is really setting in at this point. We need to ensure we have a large stockpile of wood. And there's only one man for the job. Gumpo, you're up. But do you know what's looking rather down? Our stockpile of rice. So meat from now on. Speaking of meat, a couple of opportunities roll in. Equipped with simply a shiv and a spiky stick, they naively attempt their little raid. Sucks to be them. We quickly scoop them up and add them to the menu. Another raid. And this time it's just the one. Let's see how he gets on. Ooh, so close. But not as close as Lass is to being recruited. and we could definitely use the extra pair of hands. We accept a mission to take on a couple of primitive warriors. I feel bad for these guys. They stand next to zero chance. We'll deal with the mess in the morning. During the mayhem, Lass spots an opportunity to escape. A few butt strokes and this attempt is stopped in its tracks. What? That's what it's called. Trust me, I've done my research. So yeah, we now have a lovely abundance of fresh meat. Lass's resistances has been broken and we are one step away from getting a new colonist. About time. It's all a bit much for Gumpo, and he's hiding in his room. You get a message from a lost drifter, who needs a place to rest and regroup. She is incapable of dumb labour, but not incapable of being a tasty meal. An unfortunate reality. Lass follows Gumpo's example and also hides in her room. Now we have a serious problem. Since everyone fancies a little game of hide and seek, and Gazelle is incapable of refueling the flames, everyone begins to freeze. Fortunately, Gumpo manages to snap out of it. Right as Lass is dealing with some serious hypothermia. She's lost a pinky toe. Hard luck. The following morning, Lass is recruited into the fold. But she has a vendetta. Because Gazelle was just pottering around while everyone was freezing to death, Lass is none too pleased. She does have an appropriate response. Gumpo begins to spend his days figuring out ways to progress the colony. He's becoming somewhat of an intellectual. Not too shabby for such humble beginnings. Gumpo is finding it particularly difficult to research today. There's a mad ram outside. Well, there goes that dilemma. Another dilemma. Extremely flammable structures. To combat this, we'll put down a little spot where we will craft bricks. While out gathering the resources necessary, some raccoons show up. Best to stay indoors. No need to waste precious ammunition. Some oblivious travellers get jumped by this vicious creature. This little furry chap is really ruining this guy's day. They do eventually get it down. After a spot of shopping, the raccoon jumps back into life and goes for Gumpo. A couple of bonks later, and this is no longer a threat. This fella has been well and truly chewed on, and collapses. We'll just take that. He does just about survive, and makes it off the map. Good for him. Right, what were we doing? Oh yes, trees. All that being locked inside has managed to pay off, because we have researched smithing. Gumpo has got himself food poisoning. So, yeah. He still does drag himself out to the animatory to meditate for a bit. I respect the dedication. The next day, Gumpo is doing much better, and just in time for a raid. Since this fella poses next to zero threats, everyone basically just goes on about their day. Lass puts together the last pieces of the stone brick shed, and this dummy decides to walk into a trap. She looks like she's having second thoughts. Unfortunately for her, she wanders into Lass and her big LMG. The next while is blissful for this duo. Gumpo gets down to crunching some serious numbers while Lass cooks up all the meat we have acquired. They even have some fun recreational time together, throwing rocks through a hoop. How quaint. This quiet period never lasts, however. A wolf is hunting Lass. Silly wolf. And then, much of the same. Restocking supplies, getting some serious research done. This is a rather peaceful time, as far as Rimworld goes. Perhaps out of boredom, an argument takes place, resulting in a minor scuffle. No real physical harm done, but definitely some psychological. Bound to put a dampener on the mood. What is bound to raise them again? It's growing season. Nothing more exciting than rice. And just in the nick of time, as our food supply is looking rather sparse. We are also going to have to resort to eating the inferior form of meat for a while, at least until an opportunity presents itself. A beggar called Dan shows up, asking for money. Oh, poor Dan. Just as we were going to welcome Dan, a couple of angry fellas show up. Well, isn't this a bit awkward? One moment, Dan. Right, Dan time. That was a nice restock of the old human giblets, enough to craft up a real feast. We now have enough food to welcome a new wanderer. Caldwell, who is a 80-year-old, tough, greedy excavator. Not a permanent addition to the crew, but we can put her to work mining. We really need the steel. Since we already have all that human chow, she can stay. For now. Oh look, she's taking a nap. Oh Caldwell, what are you like? I must admit, she's a bit of a machine when it comes to digging. There's just one slight issue. Her ideology. It makes her hate mining. Well, I guess we'll just have a grumpy granny milling about. Hold that thought. A big moment for us. Electricity. We can now progress past Bernie sticks. Nice. Grumpy has already had enough and throws a tantrum. After it subsides, we send her straight back out into the field to get us some much needed components. She'll be fine. As the first rice of the year is being harvested, Caldwell's daughter decides to visit, who we pawn off some goods to. Early the next morning, Caldwell has a heart attack. I hesitate to attribute it to her living conditions, but I doubt the claustrophobic room filled with brick dust helped. A few short hours later, she's already up and about. This tough old bird is really beginning to grow on me. We have our first source of power constructed, a wind turbine. Just as Caldwell was starting to look better, she goes into a catatonic state, and will be out of action for a few days. We are really pushing to get as many harvests in as possible, so this duo works together to sow the rice fields. Just as a female psychic Sue rolls in. We'll take it. Throughout all this time, Gumpo has been meditating daily. We now have 12 anima grass, reaching just past the halfway point of magical powers. Speaking of magic, we have just unlocked batteries, which means we can magically store all of the energy the wind turbine is chucking out for us. Alright, fine, that was a bit of a stretch. I thought it was a good transition idea. It's been too long since Gumpo and Lass have had their fill on human, and it's starting to become a problem. Hopefully we won't have to resort to eating our grumpy granny. Luck is on her side, however. These gentlemen want to pillage our goodies. So we quickly stage a defence, with Gumpo and Lass gunning in the back and Caldwell jumping headfirst into the fray. She is quickly surrounded and takes some serious punishment, losing her right eye. Other than that, it was a fairly successful defence, poring over the spoils and not much, other than their juicy innards. And with those, along with some rice, we can get a good stockpile of pemmican started. Caldwell goes into a daze. She wasn't too fond of the idea of butchering people. Which I can understand. But come on, be a team player. Despite all the protests, the food preparation goes ahead. Oh look, Caldwell's having a nap in the freezer. What is she like? It appears everyone has food poisoning. I can't imagine why. Lass starts the construction of a new storage area, which I must admit is long overdue. While Lass is out taking a lovely morning stroll, a polar bear fancies a chunk out of her. Big mistake. And even more overdue are individual bedrooms. Let's get on that. The process goes deep into the night. Caldwell slaving away crafting bricks while Lass puts them to good use. Some guests have arrived, shortly followed by a pack of man-eating foxes. Best stay indoors and let them sort things out amongst themselves. I was hoping you'd be able to take care of at least one of them. Time to take matters into our own hands. So we sally out and take up station behind the wind turbine. Gumpo braves a few bum bites, but we do manage to take them out. Not quite sure what possessed us to save this woman's life, but we did try. Maybe Gumpo is turning a new leaf, and is remorseful for all his heinous actions. Come on, Gumpo. Her life is in the balance, and she can only be saved by your... Well, that was rather sudden. Gumpo doesn't mess around. On the plus side, we do get some freebies. Oh, and the other gentleman didn't make it either. Alpha beavers. Now, this is a problem. Wood is a finite resource around these parts, and I'm really not too sure if they will chow down on our magical wizard tree. So let's nip this in the bud. Bud nipped. Now for a heavy push into research. It turns out Caldwell is quite the little egghead. We slap down another research bench, and the nerdy stuff commences. It doesn't take too long until we can finally craft beds. It's time to get those rooms kitted out. We like to think of ourselves more as a refined culture, so this poor bed simply will not do. Fine, that'll do. With the addition of heaters, we have some cozy spots to lay our heads. Because of our new rate of power consumption, we need to look for a more elegant solution. The obvious choice? Geothermal. At long last, a good sleep that isn't on the cold, dirty floor. Because Caldwell is a greedy sod, she will get our most prized possession. An excellent plant pot. Don't say I never do anything for you. Looks like these rooms are on the rather tight side. I think we are better than that. Let's expand them a smidge. As Lass is putting the plan to action, Caldwell goes on an insulting spree, resulting in fisticuffs. Now Gumpo has a massive hole in his room. Well, I guess it's back to sleeping on the dirty floor for you, bud. I think Lass is trying to get some form of revenge here by tearing down Caldwell's bedroom walls while she's still sleeping inside. Best put a stop to that. After all that drama, the first two rooms finally get their extension. Later that night, a herd of mad ibex roam in. Looks like we'll be spending the night here, just like the good old days. The next morning, they seem to have tuckered themselves out, and we can finally emerge. Looking at Gumpo's room here, and it reads, awful, somewhat poor, average-sized, hideous, and very dirty. Me too, room. Me too. At first glance, I thought Lass was up to her usual tricks again, but it turns out she was actually just building. Food poisoning is making the rounds again. We really need to get a hold on that. The next while is rather uneventful. The terrible food has run its course and we put a good dent into the research. We did, however, get another heater, so yeah. Anyway, just as the monotony begins to creep in, we get a call for help. Yusso here will join us if we can deal with a psychic suppression. Now, I must admit, I didn't fully read what this would entail, and is a lesson to always do your due diligence. You see, the suppression reduces all female colonists' consciousness by 50%. This is bad. It is roughly around here where I start to seriously regret my decisions. Well, at least we have a new member of the gang, right? Wrong. We are looking for specific people, and Yusso doesn't fit the bill. She does, however, throw a party. A party in an empty room filled with nothing other than vomit and blood. Interesting choice. While the festivities are well underway, an awful gnawing feeling is clawing at the back of Gumpo's head. He needs human meat. It's been far too long since his last indulgence. And just like that, issue solved. Another issue to solve is storage, and we can finally start to utilise the new space we have created. Grumpy Coldwell goes into a sad wander, which is almost instantly followed up by a food binge from Gumpo. This is concerning, because food is rather tight as is, without Gumpo guzzling down everything he can get his dirty little hands on. We need to be proactive about this, so we install an electric stove. Or at least, try. Twice. Because of Lass's negligence, we are now out of steel. Fortune has it, a structure made of the stuff is just a small jaunt away. Lass is sent out to redeem herself, and Gumpo finishes off what she started. Now, what was that important thing we had to immediately deal with? Ah yes, food. We send out Lass to gun down all of the local wildlife. You may have noticed Coldwell is extremely mopey. This is mainly due to the fact she detests almost all activities that go on within the colony, from mining to butchering people and eating them. Now, the effective thing to do would be to convert her to our evil ways, but I kind of like the idea of having a grumpy granny milling about, lecturing everyone on their naughty behaviour. So she stays as is. For now. We get a message from Joe, and he has a little secret. He begs to join us and hesitates to tell us much more than that. What could go wrong? Poring over Joe's attributes here, and he can be a fine addition to the squad. Being kind and psychically dull, with a great fighting ability alongside with a high social skill, he can become our dedicated warden and moral guide. Now for the conversion process. Unfortunately, during the scuffle, his jaw was shattered, rendering him unable to talk. We could jam a block of wood into his mouth as temporary wooden dentures, but I think we'll just take the free meat at this point. Sorry, buddy. Before we are able to have our new snack, Joe's little secret drops into our storage building. 5 of them. They are making a good attempt to break out. It's kind of mesmerising. I don't think they will get this accomplished anytime soon, so let's put them out of their misery. We line up outside and swing the door open. Well, that was easy. Thanks to Joe's secret, we are now well stocked up on food. Well, at least for the time being. Coldwell decides to take a nap while out mining, and needs to be rescued. Typical Coldwell. Now for a smidge of renovation. Much better. This continues for the next wee while, until we get a person in need. Tasty. All those hours spent behind the research desk finally pays off. We have got ourselves Geothermal. This is a massive milestone for us, as we now have a permanent solution for power. Next up on our research list, Big Boom. A minor miscalculation on my part. Some rearranging is in order. The place is really starting to take shape now. With an electric butchering table, the kitchen is coming together nicely. With the last parts rearranged, we can place down the Geothermal. No time to celebrate, however, because a bunch of prims fancy their luck. And, well, Lass does what Lass does. With that slight annoyance out the way, we can get to installing the Geothermal. And now, the future of the colony is looking a little brighter. Who knows what they will face further on down the line. But they can sleep a little bit easier, knowing that they have a reliable source of energy that is now at their disposal. So yeah, that was that. I appreciate your time. Stay happy, and I'll see you around.